Okay. Okay. So, for today's classes, we are going to be looking at Excel features. They're just going to be brief and insightful. So just a quick overview. So far for our first class, we had an introduction to Excel interface. For our second class, we did a bit of data visualization and looked at cell references. Then we had an introduction to basic functions such as sum, average, counts, maximum, minimum, and if statements. Our third class, we looked at if and or and nested if functions. We looked at pivot tables, creating and formatting pivot tables, and analyzing data with pivot tables. So for today's class, we'll be understanding relative, absolute, and mixed cell references. We'll source data alphabetically and numerically, filtering data using autofilter and advanced filter options, setting up validation rules, and applying conditional formatting to highlight data. Okay, so we'll begin. So the first thing you're looking at today is cell references. So if you joined the first class, we had a table for this Bloomfield property group, where we had property type, unit price, unit available, unit sold, total value, revenue, profit, and all that. So today, what we want to look at is cell references, and we want to use the table that we had used for that first class for this example. Okay. So what are cell references, first of all? So my definition of cell references, well, let me say it this way. So cell references basically are, should I call it, addresses that are used to identify cells. So for example, now the cursor is on, if you come here to where you have the name box, you can see K6, right? So that is the reference for that cell. And understanding cell references helps you to write your formulas clearly and also helps you to troubleshoot your formulas. Now, when you now talk about relative and absolute cell references, absolute cell references is just about locking your references or your formulas using the $sign. So when you use the $sign to lock your formulas, it now allows you to replicate your formulas in any direction that you wish. And let me explain what I mean, because I know it doesn't make any sense yet. So for example, we know that in Excel, say for example, we have C3 multiplied by D3. That is for total value, to get total value, right? And when you double click on that, Excel now replicates that formula downwards. So once you click on the next cell, you now see that that formula has been replicated. Let's come in here. It has been replicated in column D and column C respectively. You come down here and you see that that same formula has replicated across board downwards. So what that means is that those are relative references because they are not locked. There's no $sign to lock it. The moment you now include a $sign, it becomes an absolute reference. It locks that formula in. So if I locked the row, because like I wrote down here, absolute reference for row, you're now putting the $sign before the number. An absolute reference for column, you're putting the $sign before the column. The column starts with the letter, the row starts with the number. And I'm going to explain what that means. Okay, so I put an example down here. So let me just use an example to explain all I've been saying. So say, for example, now we want to calculate cell stacks, okay? So let me just come here and delete this. So we want to calculate cell stacks. You say equals to what? What was the sales revenue multiplied by Sales tax here is 10%. You put that here, 10%. You put enter. It gives you 25 million naira. The actual revenue was 250 million. 10% of 250 million gives you 25 million, right? Now, if you happen to drag this formula down, you see that these other cells here give you what? Dash. Why is the reason? Why is that happening? If you double click on this, you can see that in the formula, we used revenue, that is column G here, G3 by what? M3 to have that. And understanding how Excel formulas work, the moment you double click, you expect Excel to replicate that formula downwards in this column. However, what happens is that because there is no corresponding value in these cells, Excel has nothing to multiply it by coming downwards. So if you double click here, you see that this cell here is empty. If you double click here, this cell is empty. That is why, so when Excel comes in here, it picks up G5 to multiply by a corresponding value in M5, but it doesn't find anything to multiply. That is why it returns this blank cells for you. So for this to work, you have to use what? Absolute reference. In this case, what are we doing? We are adding the absolute reference to what? To our row. So how do we do that? It's right here. So we just come in here and you say, this is M3. We now want anything that Excel finds here in column G, you multiply it by 10. If you come down to G25, multiply by 10. If you come down to G5, sorry, multiply by 10. And how do we do that? We lock the row for M5. So let's look at how that was done here. Let's come here first. So remember, G3 multiplied by M3 is how we got this one. But when you now want to use absolute referencing to lock that row, you now come in here and you say what? G3 multiplied by M$3. All right, so let's do that again. This equals to G3 multiplied by what? M$3. Enter. So once you do that now, you can see here that G3 has multiplied by M$3. If you now double click on that to drag it down, you see that if you come into this one and check, you can see that it comes down towards G4, but still references M3 because we have locked that row. So even if you come down here again, you see references towards M3. You come down here all the way down to G8. It still multiplies by what? M3. So that is how you do what? That is how you reference a row in Excel. So that way, once you drag the formula down, you still have values popping up in these cells. So you can now see here that using absolute reference for that row, we have our sales taxes for each of the property types, for plots of land, for flats, and for office space. Okay, so now we want to move on to, let me open this real quick. Yes. So now we have seen how we can use absolute referencing to lock rows. The next thing we want to see is how to use absolute referencing to lock columns. All right. Now you can see here in this cell, I did put in a little bit of an explanation. So when I share this workbook on the group chats, you can go through this and read all of these little comments I added here for proper guidance. All right. So if you come into this cell, let's double click on that. So this is a summation of all the revenues together. And in Excel, for example, when this formula was inputted, right, in this column, you simply you just drag it across. Once you drag it across, let's write that formula again. All right, sum. So there's a shortcut to this sum actually. Let me just delete this ones. Yeah. So what you can just do is just highlight all of this and now click Alt equals to. Very easy. Once you write Alt equals to, it automatically sums up, or Excel automatically sums up these numbers for you and gives you a total. All right. So now, let me just remove this one. Okay, good. So once you've inputted this formula, you can now come in here. If you drag across board, you see that the Excel automatically replicates that formula across board for you. However, in this case, we want to look at sales tax for total value. Remember, what we did before was sales tax for what? Was sales tax multiplied by revenue. But now we want to see total value. Sales tax for what? Total value. Now, if we come in here and do what we did before, we say what? F9 multiplied by M3. It gives us our total value tax, right? However, if you now want to drag it across board, let me show you more this thing. Okay, good. If you now want to drag it across board, you now have value error. Why is that? Because Excel comes into the next column. Remember, when you're dragging a formula for rows, Excel goes downwards, all right? When you're now dragging a formula for columns, Excel goes sideways, it goes to the right, okay? Remember, in this case now, we wrote our formula here, we dragged it down. As we dragged it down, Excel went downwards, but in this case, you have locked it, so it just drags our formula downwards. But once you're now dragging your formula across columns, that is to the right, Excel now shifts to the right, trying to replicate that formula across each cell. So in this case now, you said F9 multiplied by M3. So if you now come in here, Excel now goes into the next column, which is what? N3. But N3 is total value. So it shows you what a value error. You come in here, it now shifts again. H9 multiplied by O3, and that's revenue. So it does not show you anything. Again, what do we do there? We simply use what? Sorry, we simply do what? You use absolute referencing for the column. And how do we do that? We simply add the $ to the letter. Hold on. Paste the link to download the dataset. Yes, I'm going to share this dataset on the group chat after our class, Benjamin. So what do? We simply add the $ to our column. So in this case, it is just replicated down here. What we did here was, let's just do it again. Okay. Let me delete this one entirely. Okay. So this is what F9 multiplied by what? M3. But in this case, we are now going to add the absolute referencing. So one way you can add the absolute referencing to the column is to actually just press the $ to add it there. However, a shortcut is to use the F4 key. If you press your F4 on where you have the cursor, you now see Excel to automatically reference it for you. This is a mixed referencing, which we do not need in this case. So you can press your F4 again. You can see that it keeps changing. M.3 references does absolute referencing for the row. So you press it one more time. $M3 is what references that column. All right. So once you click enter, you can now see your total value tax. And if you now drag it across board, you see that it references that same cell, M3. Okay, it locks down the formula on M3 and does not drag it into N3 or O3 or P3 or Q3. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. So these are like the basics of absolute referencing. Okay, before I proceed, does anybody have any questions? Is that clear for us to understand? Please feel free to speak up so that we can move on to the next topic. We have I think 4 more to go rather, because these two are still conditional formatting. So yeah. So any questions from anybody? It's clear. All right. Please, you guys should speak up. One person can't be speaking up for everybody. All right. Okay. So the next thing you want to look at now, let's just come in here and highlight what we've done. So that was really quick. So sorting data alphabetically and numerically, this one is actually very simple. I might just want to use, yeah. So this data set, I think I made up this data set for another student. She's a project manager, so I had to like improvise and just create data real quick for our project management class. I had to use this one for this example. So yeah, this data is already sorted alphabetically. Let me come in here and clear that. All right. So when it comes to sorting data alphabetically, it's actually very simple. If you want to filter data in Excel, right? Once you have your cursor on the column header, one shortcut is Ctrl+Shift+L, and you can see that the filter options appear at the top, right? Otherwise, you can just right-click or come to this filter here. Now that's, so once you just come in here, where is that filter option again? Click on this filter option, and you can see that the filter option appears here. So if you now want to filter by alphabetically, you can see A to Z. You can come in here and still change that to Z to A, and it starts from the bottom to the top. So I think the list there is R. So it starts with R and filters downwards. So the same thing applies to, let me come in here and clear filter. The same thing applies to numbers. If, for example, we want to filter by numbers, we can just come in here and say sort, let's say custom sort or Z to A. So Z to A starts from the highest number. All right. So this one is actually very simple and straightforward. It's just about looking at how you want to filter your data. However, if you want to use advanced filters, okay. So, hold on. Data, very good. So when you want to use advanced filters, let me just return that to what we had before. All right, that's better. When you want to use advanced filters, there are three things. I think I made a note down here. Yes. So there are three things you want to consider when using advanced filters. So you come down here, I put it down. You have your source for that data, you have your criteria, and you have your destination. Okay? Your source data, criteria, and your destination. Now, when using advanced filters helps you to just grab everything that you want, depending on the criteria that you're looking at, and then paste it in your desired destination. Okay, so let's give an example. So here on column K, I did use a criteria. Let me start with status. All right. So if I select status, this is our criteria. The criteria references the column header. So in this case, for our status now, we are looking at what's ongoing. So just come and paste it here. Okay. And then you now come to data tab. Under data tab, you're now going to see under the sort filter group, you click on advanced. So once that advanced filter tab appears, you now have your filter the list in place. No, what we need to use here is copy to another location. So they're going to ask you for your list range. So once you click on that, you're supposed to choose your list range, right? You can see it automatically, Excel knows where you're picking your data from. If you look at this data table, you can see that it is already highlighted here. I never did this myself. Excel automatically highlighted it because why? Our cursor was placed in that data table. So let me start that again from scratch. You can see that the cursor is in the data table. If I put the cursor here outside the data table and I come and click on advanced and I click copy to another location, you can see that that table is not highlighted. You cannot find those dotted lines around the table. Why is that the case? Because our cursor is outside that data table, right? However, if you have our cursor anywhere in this data table and you come in here, you click on advanced, right? You can see automatically that Excel highlights that data table for you. So now the list range is sorted. The next thing you want to look at is what criteria range. You click on this. So once you click on criteria, assuming you had not highlighted your criteria range, you can now come in here and highlight it, K1 and K2. And you can now see that that has been highlighted. Let me just come and click on this copy to another location. Okay, so come in here and highlight it, and that's done. And then the next thing you now want to do is copy to. So if I come in here, it says copy to. This one just wants you to show where you want that filter to be pasted, or the filtered data rather to be pasted. I can just take, for example, J7. Okay, and once you click OK, you can now see what Excel does, that it just extracts based on the criteria that you gave. You wanted what? Status ongoing. It now gives you all the ongoing tasks, right? From what different dates, from different departments, for different tasks, for duration, for cost, location, and proportion of completed, or percentage completed rather. Okay, so let's look at another criteria. Let me just remove this real quick. All right. So let's look at another criteria. Maybe this time around, we want to look at departments. All right. So you can just click departments. Come in here. Our criteria is what? Departments. And we want to see, let's use strategic planning. Okay. Everything that has to do with what? Strategic planning. So we come in here to the data tab, click on data tab. Once the ribbon appears, you now come to the sort and filter group, click on advanced. Okay, so once you click on advanced, you come down to copy to another location, you click on that. So once that is done, you click on your list range. Automatically, like I said, once you have your cursor or you selected any cell within that data table, automatically Excel would highlight that data table for us. And you can already see that our criteria range has already been selected here, K1 and K2. And then what we now want to do is just show Excel where we want our filtered data based on the criteria of department and strategic planning to be pasted. You click OK, and boom, Excel just does it for you. And you can now see here that based on strategic planning, we can see the tasks that are being carried out: data analysis for investment sites, deploy investment strategies. You can see the duration, you can see the status, ongoing, in progress. You can see costs, location, and percentage completed. All right. So let's look at one more example before we move on to something else. So let's use percentage completed. Let's say by 40%. Let's take 40%, for example. Okay. So mind you, you can also decide to paste your filtered data on another workbook on another sheet entirely. However, it is important to note that the sheet you're using is called an active sheet. So whenever you want to initiate this advanced filter, you have to use your active sheet. You have to start with your active sheet to initiate it. If not, it's not going to work. So we are going to look at that shortly. Excuse me. Okay, so we have this here. So once you come in here again, like I said earlier, data advanced, real quick, copy to another location. This is highlighted for us. And then criteria range is J. And then where do we want it to be pasted? We want to paste it here. All right, boom. So you can now see that based on the percentage completed criteria, we can see the activities that are on 40%. Okay, so that's all. So let's quickly look at how or why pasting on another sheet, or how to paste on another sheet rather. So if, for example, we want to use let's say status ongoing, real quick, good, on another sheet. Okay, say copy to another location. Okay, so now where you have copy to, maybe we can now come and click. Hold on, why is it not working? Okay. Okay, I need to open up that sheet first before we even try to paste it. Yeah. So on sheet 1, we come in here. Yeah. Copy another location. So you now have sheet 1. If you now want to paste it here, for example, right? And you click OK, you can now see that it says you can only copy filtered data to the active sheets. That is because we never initiated this on the active sheets. So this, in this case, is the active sheet. So if you now want to filter data, right, you now have to initiate it from this side. So list range, when you ask for list range, you can now come in here and put this as your list range, right? So highlight your list range here. You go back, it says list criteria. You come in here and highlight this one. And then we now have copy to. You can now put it here on your active sheet and click OK. It now appears here on a new sheet entirely. So this sheet where you initiate your advanced filter function is your active sheet. So your active sheet is where you're supposed to start initiating it. If you just start on maybe this sheet, for example, and you want to drag it to the other sheet, it's not going to work. So it's important for us to understand what our active sheet is for this thing to work. All right, so that's actually very simple and straightforward. Let me remove this one. Okay, so I think that is all for our active advanced filter. Sorry. Okay, so we might want to come in here and select complete for that. So the next thing you want to look at is setting up our validation rules. Okay, so we have another data table here. So this is pretty much the same thing as we have here. It's like a project management data table. So I added some things here like status, number of team members, and all that, right? So let me just delete what is here. Okay. Okay. So data validation in Excel basically allows us to, okay, it's down here, very good. So it says pick from a list of rows to limit the type of data that can be entered in a cell. So what data validation does is you control the type of data, okay, that is being entered into a particular cell. So say, for example, for status, right, we want to see only completed, in progress, stopped, and paused. Instead of allowing people to come in, it's mostly used in like data collection sets. Say, for example, now we shared an Excel file for people to capture data on the field. Maybe you're working in like a public health organization where they're carrying out a survey, and then you're capturing data of, say, people that tested positive for hepatitis or tested positive for COVID, right? Now, we now want to include options here. Rather than allowing people to come in and type in positive or not positive or whatever. So why this popped up is because we have set a validation rule for the kind of data that should be captured there. So what I just typed in now was not part of the option, so it's not going to work. So let me just delete what is there real quick so that we can create our own validation rules and we can work with that. Okay. So you come in here, you clear all. All right. I'm fixing those borders again. Right. Very good. So in this case, we are working with project management data. All right. So you have date, department, task, duration, status, number of team members, time, date, cost, location, and percentage completed. Now, what you want to see with status is we have completed, we have in progress, we have stopped, and we have paused. Now, in this case, I want to add a drop-down list, right? Maybe you have a boss that you're working with, your project manager, and it tells you, what's your name now? Michael. Okay. Nathan's hand is up. Go ahead, Nathan.
Sorry, that was a mistake. Sorry.
Okay, that's fine. So say, for example, you're working with a project manager and he tells you Nathan, I want you to create a data table for us to capture the status of our project. We want to be able to see activities that have been completed, activities that are ongoing or in progress, activities that are stopped, or activities that have been paused, right? So what do? First of all, you need to put your source, okay? Like in this case now, you can decide to input this anywhere else. But in this case, I want to put it at the bottom of the table. I don't want to toggle through too many sheets to get it done. So I came in here and I typed in completed, in progress, stopped, and paused. So I even put in a comment here, say to input data and restrict entry to what is only in the drop-down list. So after putting down the source in here, I come here and I highlight where I want to include my drop-down list. So mind you, once you come to your data tab and you come to data tools, all right? So as time goes on, we are going to look at most of how all of these things are used, maybe for advanced and intermediate classes, okay? But for now, we are looking at data validation under the data tools group. Now, for the data validation, once you click on it, when you click on data validation, you now see that the settings, there's input message, is error alerts, okay? So in this case, you want to use drop-down list. Once you click on allow, you can now see that there are different options: any value, whole number, decimal, list, date, time, text length, and custom. For this example now, we want to use what? Lists. Okay. So now once you do that, they're not asking for your source. Remember where we typed in data at the bottom? This is the source. This is what Excel wants to capture. Okay. So once you click OK, you can see that this drop-down list button appears here. And you have all of these options in here. So that is what we used for our course outline to create our drop-down list for our course outline. And we also use conditional formatting to highlight it whenever it's complete. All right. So if you click complete now, you can see that that's what cell turns green. All right. So we are going to come to that. So let's go back to data validation. So now we have done that. You can now see that our drop-down lists have now appeared. So you can come in here and highlight activities that have been completed. All right, highlight activities that are stopped, the ones that are in progress. All right. So what this does is it allows you to limit the amount of entries and also limit mistakes, because it's possible that in the process of capturing data, maybe if you wanted to type it in manually, okay, you can go and make a mistake, and maybe you wanted to type completed, you typed something else in there, or an incorrect word in there. So data validation limits incorrect entries and limits wrong entries. Okay, say for example, now I want to go and type in progress, and I typed something like program instead. All right, and I type enter. You can see that an error message pops up that says this value does not match the data validation restrictions defined for the cell. Okay, so that means that data validation limits mistakes, limits wrong entries, and allows only the correct entries to be made. Okay, so now we've done that for drop-down lists. We are not going to go through all of this, like the different types. Okay, there's a couple of options out here. We're just going to pick up a few, and then maybe in your spare time you can play around with it. Also, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or any concerns or any guidance or one-on-one classes. All right. So the next thing you want to look at is whole numbers. All right. So I created another column here that looks at number of team members. So for number of team members, you can just highlight the column again for what we want to do there, and come in and click then click on whole number. So once you click on whole number, because in this case, you want to capture number of team members, and for that, we need to use what's whole numbers, not decimals, not dates, not time, but what's whole numbers. And then there are also options for the data. You have between, not between, equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than. You can play around with all of these things, all right? But for the sake of this class, you want to look at what's between. Now, the minimum is 1, and the maximum I want on any team is 7. You can use any other number you wish. So if I click on that now, for example, now, all right, you can start making entries. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The moment you enter 8, it shows you that this value does not match the validation restriction defined for this cell. And why is that? That is because when we created the validation, we said that we want a maximum of 7. If we now increase that to 9, for example, you click OK. That means you can now go ahead and make that entry of 9. The moment you go above 9, it pops up again. Okay, so what that does is, like I said earlier, it restricts you from entering data that was not captured in your data validation rule. So the next thing we want to look at is time. Okay, so in this case, for time, I said we could use 8 to 12 p.m. So now we want to see the start time for these activities. Okay, so in this case, we looked at status, we looked at number of team members. Now we want to see time. What do? You highlight the column, and once you do that, you come again to your data validation. You click on that, you come down, you click on time. Okay, so you can now see that it says between what time to what time. In any case, you could choose between, you can say equal to. Okay, you can limit it. Okay, in this case, let's use the equal to. And come in here, you see 8 a.m. It's important for you to understand the format of your clock. The reason why I wrote it down like this is because this is the exact format of the time. If you write any time in Excel, for example, outside the format of your computer, it is not going to recognize it. So in this case, the format is you have your hour, and you have minutes, you have space, and then you have your AM or PM written in capital letters. So we want to use just 8 a.m., for example. Okay. Very good. Now click OK. So anything outside 8 a.m., for example, is invalid. You see, I just wrote 8. I never wrote it down the way Excel understands it. Or sorry, the default format of the computer is. So it's not going to recognize that. All right. So we just come in here and write it the right way. And once you do that, it enters. If you come in here and let's try if 9 a.m. is going to work, if Excel will honor the data validation we made. So you can see that we said that the time allotted for each task to start is 8 a.m. The moment you entered 9 a.m., an error message popped up. It is not recognized. Okay, so that's that. So the next thing you want to do is for dates. So in this case, what do? We highlight the column again. You come in here, come to the drop-down list, you pick dates. In this case, you can say, let's see, let me see something. What criteria did I put in here? 29 to 4th of December. All right, so come in here, but all right, click on dates. So you now have, so like I said earlier, when it comes to date and time, you have to follow the format that is on your computer. So what we have here is month first / date / year. Okay. And we want to set our criteria. Say we are looking at, today is what? Today is 8th of December. So let's say 12th of December, 1st of December rather, 2023. And then we come in here, we say 12 8/2023. Okay, very good. So you come in here and you try to enter any date that does not fall within that category. Say, for example, what we have here is 29th of November. So you come in here, you now want to maybe input the same thing that you saw there, right? You say that Excel rejects it automatically. That doesn't work. So you now have to put in data that falls within the criteria that you had instructed Excel to honor. And then you put in that and it goes in. So you can now see the essence of data validation. There's a lot more that you can use your data validation to do, but on a basic level, it's a very, very effective tool for managing your data. Okay, you don't want to capture the wrong data. You don't want people to misinform you by bringing in incorrect data or incorrect entries or something that we like to call data entry errors in data analysis, especially in data capturing processes. You now implement your data validation, and that helps you to do less of data cleaning. When you want to analyze the data, for example, for our intermediate classes, they're going to do data cleaning. And you see data cleaning because in fact, that takes up about 80 to 90% of your analysis process. Because when you want to analyze data, you have to clean it first to make sure that data is valid and accurate for your analysis. Because if you use dirty data to do your analysis, you're going to be misinformed. So what's Idara doing? There you're scribbling on my screen. So if you use inaccurate data to do your analysis, you're going to have a skewed analysis. You're going to what? Hold on. So what now happens is that you're now going to have a skewed analysis. All right. So once you're doing data cleaning, what are you guys doing on this screen? Once you're doing data cleaning, all right, yeah, you have to start, cleaning and validating your data. But once you use data validation in the process of capturing your data, it reduces the amount of errors or dirty data that you have to work with. Okay. And then the next thing you want to see is our input messages or error messages. Okay. So these are messages that provide additional information to users when they are entering data in a cell that has data validation rules applied. Okay, so I can use this one. All right, so let's see. So an input message. What's an input message here? Can call this status, all right? And then what's an error message? We could use this one, and we could say please input correct information. So these are just pop-up messages that allow you to capture, also it prompts the user or whoever is making the entries to put in the right thing. So in this case, maybe I wanted to write program. Let me just try something out and see that works. Yeah. So once you do that, what we instructed Excel to say to prompt you if you're making the wrong entry is to please input correct information. Okay, and you can now see that it tells you what to do. Don't click OK, we'll click cancel. Okay, so let's come in here and copy this. Let's edit that's our error message again so that it gives us something. So let's use a warning, for example. So let's come in here. It's not pasting up. Okay. Hope that works. So, okay. That's not working. So let's just say complete. Let's type it in manually. Complete in progress. And what's the next one? Stopped and paused. All right. So you click OK. Then we come in here and type in, let's say type, right? So it now says, please input correct information, complete in progress, stopped and paused. Okay. So that's that. So that's how you use the error message. You can also use that same logic. So show error alerts for after invalid data is entered. Okay. You can also use that here. So when the cell is selected, show this input message. So you can actually come in here and then click on this and then click it here as well. Okay. So as you can see, the moment you click on that cell, Excel now shows you what to enter. I said, please input correct information. So this serves as a guide as well. So the moment someone clicks on that cell, maybe they never knew what to enter, they can now see this pop-up message here that guides them on what entries they're supposed to do, what they're supposed to make. Okay, so that's it for data validation. Very simple and very effective, very powerful tool. So the next thing you want to look at is conditional formatting. So let's come in here. Okay, that's been highlighted. So yeah, this is the last thing for the night, I believe. So before we begin, what is conditional formatting? What is conditional formatting? So we come to the Home tab. You can see it up here under the styles group. All right. And then there's a little description down here for conditional formatting. What does it say? It says easily spot trends and patterns in your data using bars, colors, and icons to visually highlight important values. So what that does is, depending on the rule that you have inputted or you have defined, Excel uses colors to highlight any cell that matches the instructions you have given. All right. So again, we have our project management data table. Okay. And then we have, I think I should have removed. That's going to affect everything. Hold on. Let me remove some of the conditional formatting that we added and start fresh. Okay. So that's pounds again. Then remove the decimal places. Boom, you're back. Okay. All right. So we have our percentage of completed here. Let's remove. No. So let's clear formats, right? Return a percentage and then put our borders back in there. So I did create a table, or sorry, a little column here for condition. So this is like a guide, all right, for our conditional formatting formulas. That's pretty easy, right? So we're going to look at percentage, format percentage completed, format department, format dates, cost. So the different types or ways that you can use conditional formatting, all right? So like I said earlier, conditional formatting allows you to highlight your cells depending on the instructions or the logic you have instructed Excel. Okay, so in this case now, we're looking at our percentage completed. And what you want to do here is you want to highlight it depending on the condition that I have written to the right. So if you look at these conditions here, I said anything greater than 79% is what's green. Anything between 79 to 40% is yellow, and anything less than 40 is what's red. So let me make this clear. Greater than 79% is 80% upwards. All right. This is 80% upwards. Well, I think can be a little confusing at times. And then between 79% to 40% is what's between, greater than or equal to 79% and less than or equal to 40% is that one is actually very easy. That one just says between 40 to 79 because it is what's greater or equal to or less than or equal to. And then this one now says less than 40%, meaning that it starts from 39%. Not 40%, because it is less than 40%. So it starts from what, 39% downwards. All right. So let's go straight into it and write our conditions for Excel to format our cells, shall we? So we'll come into conditional formatting. You can see that there are different options. There's highlight cell rules, there's top/bottom rules, there's data bars, there's color scales, there's icon sets. You can even write custom rules under new rules. You can clear all the rules, you can manage the rules. I think for our intermediate level classes, we can now look at how to write custom rules, like a little complex custom rules using if statements and or statements, all right? And that's most important in project management because you're going to build like Gantt charts, and to build Gantt charts, you need to understand the logical statements which you're going to use. But for today's class, let's come to highlight cell rules, okay? So the first thing you want to look at is greater than. So we said, what was that condition here? Greater than 79%. All right. So we write in 79% in there. And then you now want to make it green. You can now use this green fill with green text. All right. You can now see that every value that is greater than 79, that is from 80% upwards, is what's green. You can even change that shade of green. All right. You can, let's write that again, 79%. You come in here, come to custom format. Then you come to fill. You can decide to use a darker shade of green, for example. We click on that. And you can now see that it's been transformed in here. So you can edit it to any style you want. You can even play around it. Let's try one more thing before we proceed briefly. Greater than, and then 79%. You come in here, say custom. Yeah, we want to use let's use fill effects, shall we? And then I want to change this color to green, but this is what I want to use. Let me use this one or this one. Yeah, click OK. Okay, so you can now see that there's a little bit of an effect in there. This is just me playing around with Excel. You can even do more. You can do better. There are patterns there are other patterns you can use and all that. So the next thing you want to look at is the second criteria here, which is yellow. And what that says is greater or equal to 79 and less than or equal to 40. What do? You highlight that column again and you use between this time around, all right? So you're now saying between 40 to 79%, all right? So what do we do? Between 40% towards 79%. And then we want to use yellow this time around. Let's come to our custom formats. Let's come to fill effects. Let's come to this. Let's pick yellow. Let's pick this one. Let's boom. Yeah. So we have it in there. Okay. And then the next thing you want to do is to highlight the reds. So anything less than 40%. So real quick, you come in here, you select less than. So less than 40%. Okay. And come to your custom. Like I said, just do what you want. There are different patterns to it. Let's even try something different this time around. Let's go for a pattern style. Okay. That's ugly though. That's really ugly. Let's just keep it simple. Okay, 40%. Let's leave it on regular rate. Okay, very good. So you can now see here that Excel automatically. Is someone saying something? Someone's mic was unmuted. Okay, that's fine. Please feel free to unmute your mic and speak if you have any concerns. So you can now see that using basic conditions in Excel under the conditional formatting tab, we have been able to highlight our cells based on the different conditions we have instructed Excel to do. So you can even add icons to that. You can come down to icon sets, all right? Now, once you click on these icon sets, Excel uses the pre-installed formulas to add icons to that. So you can see that the green arrows that go up are for values that are greater than 80%. For the yellows that point right, this is for values that are between 40 to 79%, and for the reds less than 40%, you can see them, the arrows that are going downwards here. So Excel automatically uses the formulas that they have pre-installed for these conditions to highlight or add icons. I think in subsequent classes, if we're doing intermediate level conditional formatting, we can now see how to add more complex icons to this, okay? So the next thing you want to look at here is let's say format department text that contains or text that contains, okay? All right, very good. Okay, so let's come to departments. Let's highlight that. So what are we looking at now? We want to see text that contains duplicates and unique values. So what do? You come to your conditional formatting again. So once you come in here, you come to text that contains. In this case, you want to look at, let's look at strategic planning. So once you type in strategic planning, automatically Excel picks it up for you in that column. So in this case, you want to highlight values that include strategic planning, and maybe you just want to change the color to yellow, for example, and you click OK. Excel does that for you. So in cases where you want to filter by color, you can now come to filter by color. You click on that, and Excel just pops up everything that is filtered by that color. And this is really useful in cases where you're working with very long data sets, because in some cases, data sets you're working with can even like go as far as 100,000. You know, Excel columns go down, like I think about 1 million columns, if I'm not mistaken, and over 16,000 rows, or vice versa. So in cases where you're working with very long data sets and you now use conditional formatting, it makes it easier for you to filter through your data. Okay, and maybe in cases where you want to look at unique values, for example, let me come in here and clear rows. Good. So let's say you want to look at unique values, duplicate values. If you click on duplicate values, Excel highlights all the values in this column, that have duplicates. For example, strategic planning pops up over 5 times, I believe, and so it's highlighted as red. Customer support pops up more than once, it's highlighted as red. In this case, if you now want to look at unique values, you come in here and click on unique values. You can see that the only ones that are unique have been highlighted in there, and that's cybersecurity, security, and what? Product development. Okay, so conditional formatting is actually a very, very smart tool that makes it easy for you to navigate your spreadsheets and your not to navigate your spreadsheets rather, but to highlight data depending on your specific criteria in your data table. Okay, so another thing you might want to use conditional formatting to do is to look at dates occurring. Okay, so if I come in here and I highlight my dates, for example, and I click here, come into the highlight rules, you can now see this one here that says under highlight cell rules for dates occurring. We now want to see, we don't have yesterday here because these dates are actually old. Maybe you want to highlight dates that's popped up in the last week. So you now click in the last week. So you now see that once you have highlighted last week, for example, Excel automatically goes into your calendar and highlights all of the dates that popped up last week. If you come in here, for example, and you want to say last 7 days, last 7 days, that's 4th of December. So it highlights it there for you. So you can now see that it makes it easier for you to navigate your data. So you don't even have to go in and do that manually. If you want to see top 10 items, top 10%, say for example, you want to highlight your top 10%, you come in here and click on top 10%, right? It highlights the top 10% for you as well, changes the color. We didn't even look at the criteria for that top 10%. So light fill rate for top 10%. So anyway, this is because it's actually hard for us to identify because that cell already has conditional formatting. You would have to clear the rules and then try that again, okay? Let's see how that works. I haven't actually tried that before. So yes, top 10% has been highlighted by red. And you can see that the top 10% there is 100%. It pops up 3 times. So conditional formatting, we can see here, is actually very, very easy for us to use to highlight our values depending on specific criteria. And like I said, in our intermediate classes or advanced classes, we will see how we can now use it to create charts, highlight, write complex formulas to show us data based on the criteria that you are looking at. Okay, so that brings us to the end of today's class. So we've been able to cover all of this. I think creating custom formatting rules, we haven't actually done this. Maybe in our next class, we will take our time because we ran out of time. Take our time to look at that extensively. But so far, we have been able to do most of what we set out to do today based on Excel features. All right, so that brings us to the end of our class today. Thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate you guys. I hope you have learned something new today. And feel free to reach out if you have any concerns. This video is going to be dropped on the YouTube page as well, so you can go and watch it. And please make sure you like and drop any comments if you have any questions, if you have any contributions, feel free. And also on the group chat, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. All right. Thank you very much for joining. Bye, guys.